Hey, welcome everybody. We are here today to talk about how to get your AI product to market faster. It's everybody knows AI is a really hot topic. Everyone's talking about it, using it, people are building it into their product. But there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenges as you do that, and we're gonna cover that today. Do a quick introduction here in a second, but we're going to start out just by talking about the challenges that you might be facing as you go to launch AI initiatives, and particularly when it comes to things like pricing and some of the operational challenges that you're going to have. We're going to dive into those just a little bit and even go into a case study so you can kind of, exercise that brain with a real world, kind of analysis so that we can work through it. And then we'll hang around afterwards if there's questions that come up. We can talk about anything AI, product development, or things specifically from the webinar here today. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Chuck Akins. I am I'm a little bit of everything, but I was a digital marketing agency owner for about 15 years. Before that, I did some other things in marketing. And my contribution are why I'm here is that I do have a low code generative AI content platform and courses that I've been developing and will bring to market. And I also, from my marketing hat, I interact with a lot of product marketers, dev teams, tech founding CEOs. And I've had some really interesting conversations and observations around bringing AI into product or trying to create a differential product, using generative AI. And like I said, I play around it with myself, and do have a small user base. But we have an expert here who is the chief product officer, at ZenTitle, and he has many years, 10, 12, 14 years in product management, with some pretty big names, and also works with the small guys that are just starting out. So I'm going to introduce John Zilch, and let him take it away, because he's got a lot of great ideas and content that he wants to share with you today. And I'll be available in the chat, as well as I'll kind of drop in here and there with some insights or different things. So if you have a question while we're presenting, throw it in chat. But without further ado, here's John.
Hey, thanks, Chuck. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing about your experience. I know you've done a lot of work with generative AI in your work. And as Chuck mentioned, I've got about a dozen plus years in product management. And I think at each stop in my career, there's been product development that has included AI in different levels. So excited to get into that. And really the genesis for this webinar today was I was speaking with a friend that I had worked with at a previous company, and was just giving him an update on what I was up to career-wise, and was showing him a little bit of the product. And he said, "Gosh, your product would be great if it could manage some of the things that we're doing with AI and trying to operationalize AI." And I thought, it is a natural fit for that. We can do a pretty good job of it. And the more we explored it, figured out we could do a really good job and really satisfy some of the challenges that he was having. So we explored it more, put it into a couple slides, and excited to share with you some of that today that we're talking about. And as Chuck mentioned, I imagine just about everyone, if you're in the software industry or maybe even any industry, you're at least exploring the idea of AI, and you're probably even developing something or have launched something recently. And I think, given that we're in the nascent stages of, generative AI and really having it so accessible now with some of the companies like OpenAI who are doing this, companies are coming up against challenges that they may not have expected. So when we talk about risk, you can see some of these green dots turn to red. There's some staggering stats out there around the hardships that companies have had getting up and running. So according to Gartner, 30% of projects will be abandoned due to some of these challenges. And that means abandon altogether, right? So basically canceling the project and maybe never getting back to it. So yeah, that's a third of the projects, but I'd say there's even a share above that that are just slowed down or made more inefficient, and over time are going to have to kind of pay that debt out. The more you want to scale AI. So we're here to help with that. We want to make your deployment faster. We want to mitigate a lot of the risks that you might have in operationalizing generative AI, so that you don't end up in that 30% bucket. So it's probably helpful now to talk a little bit about what those challenges are around AI initiatives and getting them off the ground. Here's sort of the full life cycle in operating, or getting one of those projects up and running. Of course, you want to start with the why, which is on the left side of the screen. What are our goals? What are some of the use cases that we might dive into as we're deploying AI? And then, of course, once you have those somewhat settled and teams committed to them, do your discovery and planning. So far, not a whole lot different than any other development project you might have, right? Moving on to a proof of concept and a pilot and an MVP. But where it gets really tricky now is once you're ready to take that really exciting step into launch, there's this operationalizing part. And everyone has fun building the AI into their product and making it, maybe work better or faster or whatever it might be, smarter. But there's also the operationalizing, right? How are we going to actually, build this into the product in a safe way where we can track what everyone's doing, what everyone's using. And once we have that part figured out, then we can go into optimizing and maintaining over time. So what are we talking about with operationalizing? There's a few different components to that. There's the cost of the tokens, there's pricing and packaging, right? So how are we going to fit this into how we currently price and sell our software? And then there's usage tracking and governance, right? So AI is not free, as we all know. We've got to typically go through a vendor to get that service and then integrate it into our product. So if we're going to provide that to at least some, but maybe even all of our customers and our users, how are we going to track who's using what, right? It sort of falls in line with the pricing and packaging part. And Chuck, jump in if you've experienced any of these challenges yourself in working with clients or even on your own.
Yeah, that it's an interesting thought when you think about pricing and packaging the usage of AI. And I was like you, talking with a colleague, client, friend even. And he was grappling with this pricing and packaging. And what I realized as I heard him talking is, not only is he not sure today how he should price and package it, but he's unsure how this is going to evolve over time. And,
Mm,
and I thought that was, that even more so than anything brings in the complication here, because we are so at the beginning of this journey of having AI built into not our lives, but our software in this case, that we're developing or that we're using, and we just don't know. And so he was kind of trying to pick my brain about pricing and packaging. I said, look, man, do whatever you want, but make sure you can change it. Like
yeah,
he was trying to solve a set it and forget it problem. And I was like, you can't do this. Your pricing and packaging, you're going to try a bazillion different things.
right.
So make sure that you get you think about, when you think about the opera, bringing this into ops, can't say that big word, that's what you need more than anything. Like, give yourself that flexibility, give yourself the ability for the tracking and governance. That was the most important thing. I didn't care if he got the pricing and packaging right or wrong. I mean, who knows? Who's to say? It's so early on, that the thing that he was building, and it has tremendous potential value, but it doesn't today, right? Because this is,
Yeah,
we're sitting on the dumbest version of AI we'll ever use today. It will get smarter tomorrow and smarter the next day. And as that happens, you just don't know how you might want to price and package it. So that was the thing that I wanted. And he went away from that going, yeah, you're right. The most important thing is the flexibility. Not that I get it, get it perfect today or get it right. So that's been what I've been talking with people about, is make sure you really understand this, and put the right guardrails in place now so that you do have that flexibility in the future.
It's a great point, and it's not that's not a new story to us here at Now Parent either. I think with AI, it's definitely exacerbated the need to have flexibility in your ops. But frankly, a lot of the clients that we work with here started on one model, right, and may have had their own governance or provisioning entitlement systems in place. But what happens when you want to go from perpetual licenses to subscription, and then, even change from there, even tweak some of the models that you're using, even if you're not changing the model itself? Having that flexibility is really, really important. And to your point, Chuck, I think with AI, where people know even less about where it might go, um, you want to give yourself that freedom. And to your point, right? So companies right now, right? So it's not only a problem for the future, right? And that things might change, but it's a problem right now in that a lot of companies have put their software in front of customers in their salespeople in a certain way, right? So, typically it's pay us on some kind of cadence, monthly or annual, and we'll provide a service to you, or pay us this one amount and you'll get this version of the software forever, and then you can upgrade. Those models are very different, right? Typically from what OpenAI is doing, or really what any generative AI vendor is doing, which is purchase tokens from us. Because when you purchase tokens from the vendor, now you got to figure out, well, how do I manage those costs on our side? Do I pass that down to the customer? We'll get into different strategies and mechanisms for how companies have handled this, but that whole usage-based pricing is forcing companies to now think of hybrid pricing and packaging, and almost mix and match how they're going to market today. So again, back to flexible, you'll hear that term a lot, right? With flexible tooling, you can support different models. It can be customer specific, right? So you might have cases where you want to overwrite some of the rules you have in for pricing and packaging. If you've got special, maybe it's an enterprise deal or something coming in, you want to have the flexibility on a customer level. You want to have the monitoring capabilities to see, well, is our pricing and packaging actually working? Are people using the tokens that they paid for? Are they using more, right? And that more is the fourth bullet point. We want to support overdraft rules, right? Where people are using more than what they're allotted. That's a good thing, by the way, right? Because as long as you're capturing that and you're monitoring it, it's great the customer's using more. That means they're getting even more value out of your product than they paid for. You can have a very nice conversation proactively with customers around that usage. But of course, if you don't know what's happening, it could be quite detrimental to your financials. So let's talk a little bit about one company. This isn't the friend of mine I was talking about before. This is actually Command Bar. Excuse me. And we'll walk through a little bit of how they approach this problem that we were just talking about. First, just as some table setting here, so what are OpenAI tokens? If you're not familiar, it's kind of the currency in which you can use generative AI through OpenAI, or in this case, GPT-4. And it's all predicated on the characters and what you're putting into the model and what the model's giving you back in terms of length. So in this case, the tokens are adding up to 7. There's 36 characters in this message, which is thank you for attending our webinar. And you're going to get charged 7 tokens. And you purchase tokens, I think it's in advance, right? Buy the brick, if you will. So you can buy a brick of 1,000,000 tokens for $30. And on the output side, right, you can buy 1,000,000 for $60, right? That was the pricing when I put the slide together. Of course, that's also changing, right, as we get more advanced and evolve here. And OpenAI makes their changes, but you purchase those tokens up front, right? So there's a little bit of a bet here in that you're trying to figure out the math and the economics. What are our customers going to use, and how are we going to charge for that? So Command Bar went through a really interesting process. They entertained several different models of how they're going to take that cost of tokens and work that into their pricing and packaging. And of course, with generative AI, you don't put it into your product unless it's going to provide some value and help customers with the outcomes they're looking for. So that's where Command Bar started. They said, hey, let's charge for positive outcomes. And if you don't know, Command Bar and the product named Copilot, which is where they were trying to enable AI, is an AI enabled support agent. So I think we've all been there where you go to a site and you start putting in a question or a problem or an issue, and you engage with a bot, essentially. In this case, they said, well, great, we'll charge customers every time they have a positive outcome, right? Then they're happy, and we can earn back on that. And they like that part, but what they didn't like is, what is the definition of success? Is that the chat was complete? How do we know that the customer was pleased with that outcome? And it felt too fuzzy ultimately for Command Bar to go forward with. So they said, let's just make it pretty straightforward. Okay. Whatever the customer uses, they'll pay for. We'll meter that, right? Almost like an electric bill or utility bill, and that'll be their charge. Very straightforward, right? Very clear. They've gone away from the fuzziness that existed before. However, right, a customer is going to be happy, right? They might be taking on more costs for a longer chat in which they didn't really get the outcome they wanted. So that too was fraught with some risk, and didn't equate to a very successful or very positive customer experience. So then they said, all right, let's just do kind of, hands off. Customers, figure out that part on your own. Go to OpenAI in this case, talk to them, create your own contract. And once you have a key, a license key, you come into our product, you plug in that key, and you can handle the contract with OpenAI. And we're just going to be completely removed from that conversation. So the good part is that puts all the accounting and finance and the sales part of that for the AI into the customer's hands. But the friction, right, that you're creating is now when they're trying to buy your product, you also have to sort of resell OpenAI to the customer and ask them to now get approvals and contracts going with two vendors. And they didn't want to, Command Bar didn't want to create that level of friction either. So where they ended up, all right, the outcome of all this, the ultimate solution for them was that let's take the AI, let's build it into our product, and let's not do anything special. Let's just make that AI and those tokens part of our normal pricing and packaging. It makes pricing simpler, right? Because we're essentially not making any changes. It'll add, guardrails against overuse, because they did put a limit, right? So they did say, all right, you can use up to this number, this amount of tokens. And if you go over, I'm guessing there's an overage fee, but essentially it gives every customer the freedom to use that many tokens in their chat experience. I mean, the con could be there's higher COGS, right? You might be paying for more tokens up front, but that's economics that Command Bar can work with over time to get right. So again, what they really wanted to do was value the customer's experience in all this, make it as easy as possible to get their product into customers' hands, and make their experience better by using AI. And then, of course, they could also play with the pricing over time, right? If they wanted to, support now the addition of the OpenAI tokens that they're paying for. Chuck, jump in if you have any thoughts or observations on this one.
Just my only thing, and it's not specific to AI, but even this week, because in my platform, I'm not only using AI tokens, but I'm using other types of credits as well. And anytime there is a limit usage, right? Like I had this happen last week, right? I'm because what I do is low code, no code, and things are running through Zapier or whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I got cut off, like a hard cut. Um, so I, I like the idea of embedded but limited, but you really, you got to think about this, because I mean, I know there's different ways to handle overage, and I know that's something that the platform does, but man, I mean, I didn't cancel it, but now I got to stop, and like the devs had to, they had to get involved. Like everything just came to a halt in the middle of a
Yeah,
work process. So, this embedded but limited, it has the pros, but you have to think about your governance here, because that's a terrible experience. We had to have a half-hour meeting about how to manage credits because they have a hard stop. And I can just double the account and hope I never run out of credits. But now I have to make decisions.
yeah.
So even though this was the one that they selected, I mean, as a user, we all know that problem. In AI, I mean, your input and outputs and your token generations. I mean, you can run into a limit
Can
fairly
ramp up
fast.
fast. Yeah. Yeah, we
So
didn't we didn't rehearse this, but it's funny you say that because the same friend that I spoke to about their experience, I said, how would you grade your basically how you had launched OpenAI overall and how you're governing it? And he said, probably a C.
yeah.
And I said, why is that? And he goes, when people hit their limits, we throw an error code into the product, right? This is their flagship product. And it's
Right
almost
on the
identical
street.
to what you talked about,
Right.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I'm now blocked from being productive because I ran out of credits.
Right.
They might not even know that the function that they're using or the capability feature that they're using in the product is now using AI, right? And this
Right.
chatbot, I don't know, or OpenAI tokens, right? So now it's like, wait, you just cut me off from something that I didn't even know,
I
had a
had.
limit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be really problematic, and I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know if it's the. I think we're going to get to it in a few minutes, but that's why overdraft and being able to manage overdrafts is really critical too. And you can see just, this is public on Copilot's website. They kept their pricing, right? They have three tiers, and in one of them, there's AI assist and AI responses. That's kind of I'm guessing, the input and the output, and there's limits on them, right? And that's as complex as they've made their pricing and packaging. So how do we overcome some of these operational challenges? I think one thing to consider when you're asking the question, for yourself, for the team, for your customers, how significant is generative AI going to be to the product experience? And are we creating 20 times the value of the investment? And we'll talk a little bit. We're going to get into a framework and kind of a flow chart of how you can make decisions around how you want to model this and operationalize this. But it's important to know this, right? Is AI going to drive customer value? Is it a nice to have? We get that 20x multiple just by looking at, typically subscription revenue is 5 times the COGS, right? So customers are looking for 80% or so margin on that, and then customers expect a 400% ROI, or 4 times the return on investment, right? So you've got to look at what you're paying for OpenAI and then saying, is the customer going to get 20 times the value if you follow this kind of math out? Um, and of course, that's not an exact science, but I think it's a guardrail around how important would this be if we did it or didn't do it. And to your point earlier, Chuck, about, hey, I'm going to hit my limits, then everything's going to, go off the rails. It doesn't have to be that way. It's a big part of, frankly, how our product works here at Zen Title is we manage overdrafts on features and on seats and on really anything else. So with our Zen Title 2 platform, you can set it up the way you want. Maybe you want people to use tokens forever and you're going to charge them later. Maybe you want to stop them in their tracks right when they hit that limit. Or maybe you want to stop, let them hit the limit, let them go beyond that limit, either a hard number or a percentage value above it, and then stop them, right? So there's kind of that in between state too. You might not want to let them run up their bill forever, right? Indefinitely. That could be problematic to both you and the customer. But however you decide to set that up, you want a product, you want a software monetization platform as the underpinnings of your software that's going to allow you to do all these things and manage the entitlements as such. So when we say overdraft, customer is going to sign up for an allotted amount, and then you might say, okay, they can go over 20% what they're allotted, or again, go on indefinitely, or some kind of hard limit beyond that. And just gives you an idea of kind of what that looks like in our product. This is on seats, not AI tokens, but you can see, um, there's a purple of their minimum usage, blue of their maximum usage. The green is what they've actually been entitled, and then the black line at the top is kind of where they're capped and they can't go beyond that. And you can see, when they get up to that limit, there's denials against the service, right? And again, using our APIs, you don't have to throw an error message at the customer. You can be a little more delicate around the messaging and helpful, saying, okay, well, you've hit your limit on seats or OpenAI tokens. Reach out to us, and we can, our sales team can help you procure some more. All right. So we're getting toward the end here. Just a really quick framework, like I said, kind of maybe a flow chart that you can use. Starts at the top left. And there's that 20x value again, right? So how important is generative AI or AI, to the product experience? Is it going to create that 20x value? If it's not, is it going to add friction to the sales process to ask for an AI vendor contract, right? That was that third option that Command Bar looked at. If not, then maybe consider that bring your own license model. Maybe that's okay because customers might say, yeah, I prefer to have the generative AI or I don't, right? Um, and I don't mind going out and getting the vendor license. If it is going to add friction, think about metered pricing, right? Say we've got OpenAI in the product, and if you'd like to use it, you can, and we're just going to charge you what you use. Now, if AI is going to generate 20x the value of the cost, you probably want to take a different strategic approach. You probably want to say, well, is our success KPI easy to understand by you and the client, right? And this was that first option that Command Bar had to consider. If it's very straightforward, right? I think in the case of maybe like a Stripe or a payment offering, did the payment go through, right? You have some, for an example, with a product where it's a very clear outcome. If the answer is yes, then consider success-based pricing. We can charge you based on the outcome. If no, right, and this is where Command Bar ended, consider that limited pricing, right? So we're going to embed this into the product because it is going to create 20x the value, but we're also going to limit, how much you can use. And then lastly, will the customer be able to use tokens in perpetuity? And this is really the decision around overdrafts. Do you want to stop them in their tracks, or do you want to let them continue to use it? And that can really be implemented on any of those three models to the left. So these are all key decision points. You can see there's, at least two, maybe three decision points that you can make along the journey of figuring out which model you want to go with. And in summary, identifying the right model for AI, the right tool to manage and monitor customer usage, right? So those are really the two challenges. What's our pricing and packaging going to look like? You just saw kind of a workflow that might help you start to make those decisions. And then, what's going to be the software that supports that pricing and packaging and also helps us look after what customers are using. I don't want to leave that part out. Maybe our limits are too high or too low, right? You can start to get those analytics and figure it out and tweak it over time to get it where you want it to be, get the economics right. As Chuck mentioned, we are in the nascent stages of this. So I think it's perfectly excusable, right, for companies to be figuring this out as we go, but have a tool that's going to make that easier, both in the accounting side, governing what your customers use, and also for analytics back to your team in terms of what folks have consumed with your product. So that's what we have for you today. Chuck, do we want to open it up to questions, or if you wanted to add any?
Yeah, I'd add one thing, and then
Summary.
maybe we can stop the recording as we go over to questions.
Sure.
Just like the flexibility, what I have to remind myself and is important here, mostly because AI is such a new frontier, it increases the chances that you won't think about this, thinking about ops, pricing, packaging, usage, all of this, because you're not sure what kind of value it's going to create until you develop it, and you develop it and you're ready to take it to market. And then you have all these conversations, and that's
Mm,
what send people back to the drawing board. So, what I see happening, it needs to happen, is that you've got to talk about AI governance and the unique challenges it brings, not only pricing and packaging, but even privacy and what you're submitting to a large language model like ChatGPT, and how that information can be used for training, or do you need to set up something local? There's all kinds of things that need to be talked about as you operationalize your AI functionality. Do that early on. I know you have to go dev, and everybody like, well, we don't understand it. We don't know what it'll do. Like, you figure out a way to get the conversation going so that you don't lose all that momentum as you're trying to ship, because that's the worst time, right, to be talking about this. So, take some of these things that we're talking about, even if it's that command bar case study, and get it in front of the decision makers, the people that are, sales and marketing, if nobody else,
yeah,
so do it early on. Don't wait until, well, I'm going to show you the product and then we'll talk about pricing and packaging, because you can change the price, but you got to have that flexibility. You got to think about all these governance, and there's even additional things. One I'll throw out there, and we'll kind of close, is that, I'm when you say that the price of tokens is changing, since you made the deck, I'm waiting for when I log in and they've 10x the price. I mean,
yeah,
that, then all of a sudden I definitely need flexibility, because my cogs are going to go up, and that's not something that I have to really think about right now. I mean, OpenAI, I mean, they're a billion-dollar company, but AI is expensive. Somebody's got to pay for this. And it might very well be SaaS companies instead of the end user, if you don't figure out how to create that 20x value now, and then how you do that forward. So there's a lot of stuff going on here just beyond what we traditionally think of in a traditional model or a usage model. Like, there's more going on here when you think about the cost of the tokens, the delivery mechanisms, governance, feature and values. I mean, you got a lot of talk. You got a lot to talk about and think about. So, but John, I appreciate you sharing the case study, your knowledge, your stories about talking with your colleagues, and in product management, product marketing, anyone that's a product leader. So thanks for sharing that, and let's go ahead and maybe shut down the recording, and then we'll take some questions from the group.
great. Thanks, Chuck.